Hi friends, welcome to Azure Content. This is part 33 in Mapping Data Flow Scenarios playlist. In this video, we are going to learn how to pivot columns of CSV file using Mapping Data Flow. So let's see the requirement in details. So here you can see this is our input dataset where we have 4 columns: project ID, project type, column name and column value. So our requirement is we need to pivot these values into column names, which means if you see the distinct values present in this column, it is user ID and username. So these values should be converted as column name itself. So you can see first two columns are as it is, that is project ID and project type. After that, column name and column value is replaced by user ID and username. So these two values should be coming as the column name, or what we call as headers. And the records that these columns will be holding is nothing but the same content which column value is holding. So the corresponding data present in these rows will be converted into the column values. Okay. Now there is another thing that we need to do. So we also need to merge two rows into single row. If you see the first two records, project ID is 1, which is coming as the same in output. Project type is internal, it is the same that we are expecting in output. Now, as we discussed, user ID will be converted as the column name and its corresponding value is this value present in the column value. Okay, so 1 will be present here. After that, username would be coming as another column. So this Alex A would be displayed here. Okay, so it means we are merging these two rows into single row itself. Similarly, the next set of rows will be merged together and would be converted into single record. As you can see, user ID value is 3 and username is Brad C. Okay. Similarly, the same thing will happen with other records as well. So basically, we need to pivot the row values into column names, as well as we need to merge two rows into single row. Okay. So let's see how to achieve this using mapping data flow. So let me go to Azure portal. So here is the CSV file that is holding the same record that we saw in the presentation as input dataset. Okay. So this is the record that we have here in pivot table _10jan.csv. Okay. So we are good now. Let me start creating the data flow by going into ADF portal. So let me hit on data flow. And here the first thing that we will do is we will turn on this data flow debug option so that the cluster will be ready and we would be able to preview the data during creation of the data flow. So meanwhile, let me add the source transformation. So you can see data flow debug has been turned on. So now let me create a dataset that will be pointing to our input file. So let me select ADLS Gen 2 and our file is in CSV format. So let me select CSV. Let me select existing linked service and let me navigate to the path ADLS input as our file is in ADLS input container. So let me select that. So our file name is pivot table.csv. So let me select that. And the first row is the header. As you can see, this is the header. So I'm selecting first row as header and I'm importing schema from connection and let me click on OK. So our dataset is ready. Let me hit on preview data to check if the data is coming perfectly or not. Yeah, so our data is visible. So now if I think the requirement is very simple and I can add a pivot transformation and get the job done, then what will happen? Let us see. Okay. So let me add a pivot transformation. And if I group by project ID and let me go to pivot key. So here we need to select the column which we will be treating as the pivot key, which means the column whose row values we need to convert as the column name. Okay. So in our case, it is nothing but column name column. Okay, so let me select this column name column here and let me go to pivoted columns. Here we need to give value to these columns. So our value is nothing but the values coming from column value. So here we need to write an expression which will be also having an aggregate function. So the example of aggregate functions are min, max, sum, average, first, last. Okay, so let me use first and let me select column value and let me preview the data and we will see what happens. Yeah, so this is the result that we are getting. Why we are getting only 2 records is because we have grouped by project ID and we have only 2 project IDs, that is 1 and 2. So what it is doing is it is grouping the whole record into 2 parts. That is, the first part is this one which is having project ID 1 and the second part is this one. Okay, and in these individual sets, whatever is the first column value, we are getting that as the result for user ID and username. So which means we have the first record as 1 for user ID and LXA for username for project ID 1. So this is what we are getting. For project ID 1, user ID is 1 and username is LXA. Similarly, for project ID 2, user ID is 1 and username is LXA. So this is what we are getting. So we are not getting the expected results. So what happens if I add project type as well in the grouping? So let's check. Let me hit on refresh. Let's wait. Yeah, so the data is visible. So now you can see what happened is, let me clear this. So now it segregated the whole records into these parts. That is, this is one group. Okay, that means where the record has project ID 1 and project type internal. Okay, then this is second group which is having project ID as 1 and project type external. Then the third group is this one where project ID is 2 and project type is internal. Okay. Then the fourth group is this one which is project ID 2 and project type external. Okay. So in each individual groups, whatever is the first value for user ID and username, we are getting the same in the output of our pivot transformation. Okay. So that's why we are getting 4 records in this output. Okay. So this is again not the expected result, as we are expecting this as the output. Okay. So what I will do is, instead of grouping by project ID and project type, which is not having any unique data, so what I will do is I will introduce a new column that is coming from surrogate key. Okay. This transformation would generate unique individual rows corresponding to each of the records. So let me give the name as ID. Okay. So let's preview the data here. Yeah. So we got an additional column which is holding unique record for each of the rows. Okay. So now I'm gonna group with this ID as well. So here I'm going to add this new column ID for grouping. Okay. So let me hit on data preview now and let's see what happens. Yeah. So the data is visible now. You can see the data has not been grouped. We are getting the same number of records as the number of records present in the source. But the problem here is it is not able to understand that for this user ID, this is the username. It is giving null values for the corresponding user ID. Okay. Similarly, if this is the username, it is giving null to the corresponding username. Okay. So what we understood is it is not directly achievable by pivot transformation. So we need to apply some logic in order to pivot these columns, as well as we need to merge 2 records into single individual record. So what approach we can follow is, let me go to Excel. I have pasted the same records here coming from the source. So what we will do is we will split the whole table content into 2 parts. Okay, let me add a filter here. And let me select only user ID at one time, and let me copy these records into another cell, and similarly let me select username and copy these into another place. Let me copy the column names as well so that we can understand it better. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to split the records into 2 parts. One will be having only user ID and the other set of records will be having only username and its values. Okay. So once we achieve this, then we will introduce this ID, that is the column coming from the surrogate key, into individual groups. Okay, which will be holding unique records for each of the rows. Okay, so it will be like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9, since there are 9 records for user ID. Similarly, we will be having same content for ID 2. Okay, so this is what we are going to achieve first. So after that, what we will do is we will perform pivot individually on these two groups. Okay, so it will result into this value. So let me copy this. So after pivoting, we will have user ID as one column and its values will be like this. All these values will be present in this user ID, right? Because we are going to give first of column value and we are going to group using ID and project ID and project type. And since we are grouping using project ID, project type and ID, so we will get ID as well in the output result. Okay. So this particular part is similar to the group by clause in SQL, where we need to aggregate some columns using some aggregate functions like count, min, max, and apart from that column, whatever columns we want as the output, we need to use the group by clause on those columns. So similarly, since we need these values in the group by, so we are going to add project ID and project type as well. If we do not add, we would be getting these results, which is the expected result in user ID, but we need this as well in the part of our results. So that's why we are grouping project ID and project type as well. Okay. So we will be landing upon this result. Similarly, for this group as well, we will perform pivot transformation based on grouping of project ID, project type and ID2. Okay. So we will land on this result. So these two columns will be there and the newly introduced column will be, after pivoting, it will be username and these will be its values. And of course, as we discussed, ID2 will be part of the output since we are grouping using ID2. So now what we will do is we are getting these two results. So we will use join transformation based on ID1 and ID2. So these columns we will be using to perform the match between these two data sets. So wherever the record matches, it will join these two data sets. So we will land on these results. Let me copy this and let me paste these as well. So this is what we will get after join. And on top of this, we just need project ID, project type, user ID and project name column. Okay, so we will delete these columns using select transformation. Okay, so let me delete this. Let me delete this as well. And we will land upon this result, which is the expected result. Okay, as you can see in the presentation. So this is what we are trying to achieve using data flow. So let me go back and first of all, let me clear all this. Okay, so let me go back. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to split the whole records into two parts. One will be having column name as user ID and other will be having column name as username. Okay. So let me use conditional split here to split the records into multiple streams, okay, based on the conditions that we provide here. So let me give name to the stream as user ID stream and similarly for other stream, let me give name as username stream, okay. So here for user ID, the condition would be that the column name should have value as user ID, okay. So column name is equals to user ID, user underscore ID. Okay, let me hit on save and finish. And apart from that, everything else is having column name as user name. So we need not write the condition here. If the records does not match this condition, then it will automatically go to the next stream. Okay, so let me hit on data preview and let's see how the data looks like. Yeah. So we got the result. So you can see we are having only those records where column name is equal to user ID. And similarly, let me select another stream for username and let's wait. Yeah, so you can see the data. So we are getting those records where column name is username. Okay. Okay, so we are good till here. So now we need to introduce this ID1 column and ID2 column for each of these streams so that we get unique values for each of the records. Okay, So let me add surrogate key transformation for that. So first key column would be ID1, and let me hit on data preview. Yeah, so you can see this ID1 has been generated, and this is holding unique records for each of the rows. Okay. Similarly, I will add another surrogate key here in the next stream, and this time we will give ID2 as the key column. And now let me preview the data. Yeah, so the data is loaded. You can see ID2 has been generated for this stream, where we are getting the unique identity value for each of the records. Okay, so we are good till here. So now, as we discussed, we need to use the pivot transformation to pivot the row value of column name into column value for each of the streams. Okay, so let me use pivot transformation here. So to group by, we will use project ID, project type, and ID1 here. Okay. Now in the pivot key, as we discussed, we need to select the column whose values we need to convert as the column name in output. So we have column name column, which is having the values which we need to convert as the column name in the output. Okay. So we have to select column name in the pivot key. Now in the pivoted column, we have to generate the value which this newly generated pivoted column will hold. So these values will be coming from this column, that is column value. Okay, and we have to give aggregate function to write this pivot expression. So for that, I am going to use first as the aggregate function. We can use any other aggregate function as well, like min or max or average. Those will also work. So here inside this, we will use column value as we discussed, and I'm going to leave these values, which is optional. So let me leave it like that, and let me hit on data preview. Yeah, so the data is visible. So you can see project ID, project type, ID1 is coming because we have grouped the using these three columns, and this is the newly generated pivoted column, which is user ID, and this is holding these records, which is similar to this one. Okay, so we are good. We are getting the exact this value as the output of the first stream. Okay, now we have to do the same thing for second stream as well. So let me add pivot transformation, and let me group by project ID, project type, as well as ID2. Okay, so let me use ID2. Now in pivoted key, again I'm going to use column name because column name is holding username as the column value, which we need to convert as the column name itself. Okay, okay, so I have selected column name, and similarly in pivoted column, we have to provide the value which this column will hold. Okay, so it is coming from column value. So let me use first of column value again. Okay, let me hit on save and finish, and let me preview the data. So let's wait. Yeah, so the data is visible. So you can see project ID, project type, and ID2 is coming because we have grouped using these three columns, and then username has been generated as pivoted column, which is holding the values coming out of this column value from the source. Okay, so we are good. Now the only thing we need to do is we need to join these two streams based on ID1 and ID2 so that we get only one data set. Okay, so this is the part where we are actually merging two records into one record. Okay, as discussed in the requirement phase. Okay, so we have to merge these two records into one individual record, right? So what we did is we splitted these into two records, and then we gave one surrogate key which is having same value in these two records, and then we are going to join it into single individual row. Okay, similarly this is the same thing which is happening with other records as well, and it is generating single record for a set of records. So let me go back. Now let me try to implement this join on top of these two data sets. Okay, so let me add join transformation, and here let me add pivot 2 in right stream. Let me select this, and we are going to perform inner join as we discussed on top of columns, that is ID1 and ID2. So it will try to match ID1 and ID2, and wherever this join gets fulfilled and the records matches, it will merge those two datasets into single dataset. So now let me preview the data. So let's wait. Yeah, so the data is visible. So you can see we are getting two project IDs, two project type, one ID1, ID2, and user ID and username. So this is what our requirement was. So now we don't need these duplicate columns, and we also don't need ID1 and ID2. We just used it as the intermittent columns that we generated using surrogate key. Okay, so let me remove all these using select transformation. So let me add select transformation here, and we will remove one of the pivot one of the project ID and project type. So let me remove, and let me remove ID1 and ID2 as well. But here you can see we are not able to view user ID and username columns. Okay, so what we have to do is, since these are the generated columns, it was not in the source, so it is not coming as the part of the schema. So let me remove this select transformation, and before that let me hit on this map drifted option in the join transformation preview. Okay, so what it will do is it will redefine the schema. Okay, so now let me click on data preview. So it will change the schema. You can see that in the inspect tab. As you can see here in the join transformation, we did not had user ID and username in the schema, but in map drifted inspect, you can see these two also have been added. Okay, so the data preview looks like same as we can see in join, but only thing is schema has been modified. So now let me add select transformation, and now you can see user ID and username columns as well in the select option. So let me remove one set of project ID and project type, and let me remove ID1, ID2, and we are good to delete this. Okay, so we are left with only 4 columns that we need. So let me hit on refresh. Yeah, so the data is visible. So let's compare it with the expected output. Let me open the presentation. Let me clear all this. So you can see we are expecting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 records, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 records in the output as well. And if you match it with the expected output, it is same, and we have achieved it using dataflow. Okay, so that's it for this video, guys. We have achieved this requirement using pivot transformation, join transformation, and surrogate key transformation. Okay, so I hope you like the content. Please keep practicing these small scenarios in dataflow. It will help you in growing in ETL background in data engineering field. So please like this video and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done it yet. Thank you.